All right, welcome everybody to episode 2 of The Factory Floor, the podcast where we talk about world building, writing, games, and basically anything else that crosses our fancy for the evening. Tonight I have with me Green and Nex from last time, and then we also have a new visitor, Monica, who is joining us to talk about a world she has actually, developed a story off of. So that's actually very exciting, and good practical advice that you can probably give to those out there that are trying to get to that point. So let's do a quick introduction of Monica. We'll ask her a couple questions just to get. Basically, just to make her suffer like the rest of us did with the first episode. So,
I knew I should have watched that. No, just kidding.
Know, right? No, these will sound familiar. So the first question: define world building.
To me, world building is all about providing a context for whatever your primary activity is. The world is really important, but it is not the center of your story, your role-playing game, your movie, whatever. It's what enables you to tell a story that doesn't have people saying, wait, no, that doesn't work, that's totally wrong, that couldn't possibly work. It's about providing a rich setting for what you're actually trying to do.
Nice. And completely opposite of some of the answers we got last week, or last episode.
Well, good. Variety is good.
You're the one who participated. You get the point. So
yes.
Yeah, you're winning this round.
Yeah, you're probably going to win all 3 rounds because I'm not going to ask you too many questions.
All right.
So, question number 2: what skills do you bring to world building? What kind of background do you have that makes you valuable to help people?
I don't have a lot of specific domains like mathematics and specific sciences. What I have is a tendency to think about things and take them apart and try to look at implications. I have some academic background in sociology, just a little bit, but mostly I'm a geek who spends way too much time thinking about these things, probably like many of our other users.
Monica, I also understand that you have a very fancy hat.
Oh, that's right. Monica's a big deal.
Yes.
The diamond.
Monica is one of our moderators.
One of the.
She brings the fan hammer.
The terrifying diamond.
Actually, there we go. Yes, they actually issued us hats. Yes.
That's fantastic. I need to get one of those. Although it's probably not.
Well, you have to wait for the next election, and then you have to win it, and yeah.
I was pretty happy. I think I pulled in like 7th or 8th place last time.
Yeah, you did well. Yeah.
All
but
right.
it was the biggest field I've ever seen. So
it was massive.
No shame in any in placing anywhere in that. Yeah.
All right, last question then. Well, actually, you know what? The third question was going to be, what are you currently building and how far along are you? But we're going to cover that in a little bit.
We're going to talk about that later. So yeah.
So I'll just. How about tell us something about yourself that will make people remember you? Just any random fact.
We were talking before about apparently you don't know too many people who are contraltos. So I sing in a choir, and I usually end up singing tenor because volunteer choirs, amateur choirs, are perennially short of guys who can sing tenor. And many of the alto lines are actually too high for me. So I've got the low C.
That I will remember.
Nice.
Yes.
All right, so to warm up tonight, to get things started, to get the juices, creative juices flowing, we're going to play a game, a different game. Last time we played the alignment game, which was surprisingly serious. But the game tonight will be playing gods, plural gods, because there's 4 of us. And the objective of the game is to collaboratively, build a world right here and now. So we will each take a turn, introduce a concept or a theme or a rule or a science or technology or something along those lines. And we each take turns until it devolves into a conversation like it always does. So, who would like to start?
I nominate Nex.
I nominate myself.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so gonna start out this world with a kind of twist of technology. Three technologies that kind of matured, hit their stride within about a 15-year period. Wireless telegraphy, the airplane, and linotype machine. But they all three hit their stride without gunpowder being widely utilized, popularized, made efficient machines out of. So there's not going to be firearms widespread.
Okay.
So.
All right. Let's go around the horn. Let's go, Monica. What do you have?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I didn't actually lay us out in order, so okay. So just thinking about what the implications are of not having wireless technologies or easy transport. This suggests to me that that people are going to have their communications via wired, tethered means. We've
So
got television.
There is wireless
We've got-
telegraphy, so like Morse code over. It's like a precursor to radio. Radio has not been figured
Right,
out.
but we don't have radio. We don't have we don't have radio. We don't, for all practical purposes, have broadcast radio because most people are probably not going to be trained in Morse code. So the way that people communicate with each other across distances is going to be affected by this, because we our own world went from radio to television to cable and 500 channels and the internet and so on. But here, this world didn't pass through that radio phase, or hasn't yet. So I've been thinking about maybe other communication technologies got more emphasis early. Anything that can be wired. So I'm thinking television, for broader dissemination. Without the linotype printing, we also don't have cheap daily newspapers. They probably aren't going to be cost effective. So how people get their news is going to be different. So these are some of the things I've been thinking about. And I should probably let somebody else talk because we're going to go around several times. So.
All right, Green.
So the addition to the world that I wanted to make, I was recently listening to a podcast about Anabaptism in the 1500s in Europe. And Anabaptists had some really radical ideas like free education for everybody. Like they're basically communism in the 1500s before Marx was even a blink in his great granddaddy's eye. And so into this world I'm going to inject communism that actually made it instead of getting squished by the feudal lords. Like they were able to build up a corpus of enough people that the lords and the Pope couldn't say, all right, well, you're dead now. So there's a place in Europe where communism was able to grow up, mature, flourish, and basically everything that Western society takes for granted now, mostly, actually got its start like 2 centuries earlier.
Nice. So if I have to fit into that, I think I'm gonna go down the biology route, and I'm gonna have to say that humans have developed, and I'm not gonna go into how or why, but have developed the ability to communicate over short ranges telepathically. So if you're sitting in a room with someone, you don't actually have to open your mouth.
Okay.
Alright, so I'm going to assume that humanity has somehow picked up like shortwave or short-range radio, like basically metal, like some kind of metal nervous system so that you can send and receive radio waves. So if that's true, then that makes the emphasis on wireless telegraphy much less, because you can already communicate over short distances. Basically, like within a town, you just kind of put a little umph into it, and you can talk to everybody in town, and everybody can hear you, and you can hear everybody else. So within the town, there's not. You kind of already have instant email. You don't need.
So counterpoint to that, like, okay, so humans are extremely visual creatures, so we like, part of the reason why television stuff took off so radically as well it did, because we have an organ that's just so biased towards visual, information. Our brains are so biased towards visual information. Wouldn't that, because it just see a cultural pinning, the idea of silent wireless communication, that it almost have more cultural significance and more effort put behind it? Because it's like, oh yeah, this is a natural way we express ourselves. This is better than, just a pure bias, better than a wired technology communicating. So this would be considered more of culturally, important or significant. Would that maybe be the case?
Yeah.
We can get to that. All I'm adding is
Right.
that humans can short range can communicate over short distances telepathically. So, next on the list, what do you have to add?
Okay. So communism took off, and am I correct in assuming you mean it is a singular, widespread, rather than a lot of micro, small communists? Is that was that your intent?
So you can do.
We're talking about like one organization that was communist, or there was hundreds of organizations that were
So
communist?
you'd have to have one. You'd have to have one organization or an alliance of organizations. The Pope and the German nobility. They're basically God, and in the case of the Pope, it is God. So you'd have to have an organization that is strong enough to be able to militarily withstand any incursions from the Pope and the German nobility. Because if you can't, the reason that communism didn't start until 1800s or whatever is because the nobility is like, this is an intellectual cottagen, we have to get rid of this, and they just wiped everything out. So
It's true.
whether it's like lots of smaller factions or whether it's one big faction, I don't really care. It has to be big enough to be able to list. They have to be basically a communist country
Okay.
or communist kingdom or
Okay.
something.
If you don't care,
That's
I'm
weird.
going to lean more towards one organization rather than a group of organizations.
Whatever.
And I'm going to say that it was partially driven because arguably one of the weaknesses of communism is that because it is the central body that's organizing everything, some things that other systems will allow managed on a more non-regulated level, like capitalism is pure capitalism is completely unregulated, but it's varying degrees. That systems accounting, record keeping, and trying to organize it advanced abnormally quickly, and bookkeeping, and that also caused that computational devices, the precursors to computers, were actually figured out where they're practical. They're basically mechanical computers, and they were developed in probably as early as the 1700s. That we had practical. The several hundred years precursor to computers, these mechanical devices that could use to add numbers or keep track of organizations by spinning gears and stuff. So those were developed and those were practicalized and widespread. So
Okay, so you're saying that we have practical
advanced,
mechanical computers
which
a couple
allow for
centuries earlier.
then
got them.
before we got
Okay.
electronic, which those actually did exist in real life, but they were never practical or widespread. So I'm making that shift.
Abacuses were very widespread in the East, but
Sure.
Oh, yeah, it was like more complex, I guess. They did series. I don't know how to describe it. It's wheels and gears, and they make computations. So
yeah.
All right. Monica?
Okay. All right. So I think given what we're talking about with developing computer technology earlier, and with our restrictions on intercontinental travel, we've still got. We've got trains, we've got land vehicles, as far as I can tell, but planes are what enable people to move great distances. So wanting to, excuse me, my screensaver has just kicked in. There, that's better. Yes, I'd like to actually be able to see you folks. Since we can't move as easily in person, it's more important to actually be able to communicate in other ways. So I think we have pushed to develop something like the internet. It's all wired, pretty much, as I said before. Now the telepathy angle that you mentioned is interesting because if anybody can listen in, if it's like speaking in a room, then it doesn't completely replace other forms of communication, because you want to have a private conversation with somebody, you can't just beam it to him. But if it's one-to-one telepathy, then you can't broadcast. So so this is, I'll make a question back to Green, because you brought telepathy into it. How were you envisioning that? Are people communicating focused or broadband, telepathically, short range?
So what do you think, James?
Let's see here. I would have to go with.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was James. Yeah.
Nope, no problem. 1-to-1.
Okay.
And
so
no
yeah,
interception is possible.
Nope, none.
Ooh, that's so
I'm sorry.
powerful.
It's very
Say?
sneaky and devious.
Yeah.
Is it intrusive? Like, is it like talking where I can't read their mind by talking? Is it just like you push it to that, you didn't broadcast that person, or you send that person, but it's not, it just isn't, you know what I'm saying? Like, computer systems communicating theoretically can be invasive, but talking I can't really invasively affect your mind. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, just simple words. So you can have
Yeah.
a conversation with somebody. Yeah.
So it's the equivalent of texting, but telepathically. I'm talking to you, and
Yeah.
nobody else is listening in on it.
Except there's no stupid little pictures that you send at the same
Yeah,
time.
no stupid little pictures. But also, this is all short range. So all of the factors that we've talked about, I think, are going to push people into urban centers. If you really rely on wired communications, if you can't just hop on a plane to go somewhere, you really need to live with other people, and especially if you've got this extra way of communicating with people, you need to be around people. We're going to see people congregating. We're not going to see as much dispersion as today, where you can sit in your cabin in the middle of Wyoming and be completely connected to everything. And if you want to be in Europe tomorrow, you can be.
It's true. All right. Let's see here. Green, you're next, right?
Yeah.
So to expand on Monica's, if you, like, one of the things that makes cities so amazing is that you have all these people that are in close proximity to each other, and so you can bounce ideas off each other.
Yeah.
You get some really interesting network effects from, I know so and so, and they know like 100 different people, and they know 100 different people. So if you have this encrypted, secure communication between you and the other person, and you can't intercept it. I'm assuming that this is also really quick. So you can basically go into the room with your collaborator, and instead of assuming that it's read-write, so I can both read from your mind and write to your mind, and you can do the same for me.
It's like a real time. It's like a real-time conversation without your mouth opening.
Right.
Okay.
I'm also assuming that the integrity of the symbols that you can send is much closer to what you're actually thinking, instead of having to pass through your thought, hits language, hits the other person, and then they have to translate language back to symbols. This is symbol communication. That's mind-blowingly powerful. So if you get two really smart people in the same room and they start talking to each other, then they can start riffing really, really quickly. That's so powerful. I can't even talk. That's crazy powerful.
That's ironic. All right, see, look.
But he's thinking at you really hard.
Right. All right, so let's see. What other wrench can I throw in this universe? So we have telepathy, some issues with technology being on time, urban centers, communism. Let's see.
Communism in Europe, at least, with
gaining traction earlier.
and earlier, but with some of the other barriers we've got, there might be more isolation and more independence in other parts of the world. than
Yeah,
we're used to. Yeah.
what I'm thinking is, so colonialism still happened to a certain extent, but it was much more the earlier waves of colonies that were set up. So it was, people that were, for all intents and purposes, refugees who were on the run for one reason or another, and they spread out pretty significantly. So rather than the United States, you ended up with communist colonies and non-communist colonies, religious colonies, mercantile colonies, etc. And they never really got together and formed a cohesive unit. That and Africa. Let's add in that Africa was never really colonized either.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So I'm going to
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Why?
Doesn't matter. Because
Dude, I'm gonna have to go dig in that. Come on.
I'm gonna go with they didn't do it because the colonial efforts were less focused on global expansion for superpowers, and they were less trade related, and they were more people running away or trying to get away or find a place where they could do what they wanted, and Africa, for whatever reason, was not appealing. Mainly because most Europeans that emigrated would have known North Africa, which is all desert and not an ideal spot to start a new colony.
Congo's pretty lush, though.
Yeah, that's they didn't have atlases back in the day, man.
So I'm going to draw a conclusion from this. Mostly kind of playing along with the communism, I guess, sort of, but also the telepathy, that vertical power is going to be probably pretty limited, because a lot of situations power emerges that individual can exert his authority and silence those around him. But if you can be in a room with your advisors and your enemies, and they can be talking right in front of you effectively, and you have no way of knowing, and they know they're perfectly safe, that nobody can overhear them, nobody can spy on them, it's really easy to dissolve or find new agreements of power, and so it's very hard for somebody to silence or control messages or anything like that to remain in power. Secret meetings and organizations can happen on street corners, and an observer has literally no way of telling the communications are happening, which also means things like spying would almost be so ridiculously commonplace it might even be less of a concept, because it's just assumed you can secretly communicate, assuming that these ideas, as soon as they're introduced to somebody else, they can be spread, with no way to trace it back, really, besides just telephone game, and he told me, he told me, he told me, he told me. So the vertical power is going to be very hard to establish and very hard to control and maintain.
Yeah, and just playing. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, and just playing on that, because we don't have as effective broad scale control. We don't have guns, and we don't have we don't have some of the communication means. We don't have the ability to have the army there tomorrow, as much. But we do have this decentralized, very powerful, very subversive communication scheme that you're talking about. I'm thinking of like resistance cells, where you've got 3 to 5 people who are working together on stuff because they're all talking one on one, and there are these other guys they're working with, and it's very, very decentralized, as one person from this group talks to somebody from this group and starts spreading an idea. Communism developed early, and I think it will stay for a good long time, and whether it stays in the long haul is going to depend on how much of any government, really, because I'm not picking on communism in particular. It's just the only one that's been named. But people will not change power by standing up on by having the soapbox, the humongous rally with hundreds of thousands of people tuning in real time and so on. But it'll happen sneakily, small group to small group to small group, and they don't even have to be thinking of it as sneaky. This is just the way we talk. This is the way we bring about change in the world. It's very much you actually matter. In our society today, there's you can easily get the feeling that you don't really matter. Your vote doesn't matter, your actions don't matter. But here, with the communications that you've talked about, with the decentralization, with people spreading out, individuals matter, and they'll know it.
Yeah, there's no reasonably natural way of turning this communications method, which I'm assuming would be very popular and very just commonplace, more than even talking maybe, to a large scale. You can't even get up on, like I said, a soapbox and start talking like you can with a vocal. That just doesn't exist with a one-to-one private communication. So
Yeah.
everyone will be a lot more personal, and the voice, representatives would almost lose power. Like people who oh yeah, they're our spokesperson. That concept would exist a lot less if it existed at all.
Mhm.
So,
A lot more
for you,
power
James.
and responsibility falls to the individual. Sorry.
So, question for James. So, we've established that this telepathy is point to point, totally secured. Is broadcast also capable?
Nope.
No broadcast. Okay.
No broadcast.
What about when they're sleeping?
You could
Like, this is a
make someone-
conscious
you-
thing only.
You could make someone's life truly miserable because you just keep waking them up all the time.
But
so do you know if the other, if James, you were to psychically talk to me, do I know James is talking to me, or is it somebody talk to me?
Yeah, I would think it would have to work, so you would have to know the person before you could do this. For some reason.
So if you try to wake me up, I would just know it's just like you screaming in the other room. I would know you're waking me up, and I go punch you.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
Okay.
so
how is the original how is the original handshake done? Can I telepathically talk to anybody I know, anybody I can see? I mean, I know there's a range component, or does there have to be something like, accepting a friend request? Do you have to permit me to talk to you?
Wow, we're just digging into a telepathy system now.
I think it should be less
That's
computerized and less security conscious, and should be more organic. Is sort of the direction we should
Yeah,
take it.
I kind of feel like
Yeah.
if you restrict it at all, it starts to make less and less sense and be less realistic. So I'm pretty sure you just basically
You're projecting words onto their brain.
Yeah.
if you see
Okay.
a person, or if you know a person's on the other side of the wall, you can just go
Right.
and
Okay.
so that means it's directional,
well, not directional
Yeah.
necessarily, but
focus based.
But short range.
but you have to know
Yeah.
you have to have a target in mind. So you couldn't just a complete stranger that you've never met before that's in the hallway walking down the hall, you wouldn't be able to communicate with them.
Okay.
So it's sort
So
of
it's
like
less of a harassment technique.
right. So you'd have to probably it's sort of like an IP address that once it's registered, you just it's built into the system. So you just kind of
Damn,
know
no ARP pings. Dang.
Wow. Green, what are you gonna add?
So, elsewhere in this world, green.
yeah.
In response to communism, because communism, well, let's assume that the version of communism that was made did actually do all these nice things for the common people, like education. They have a good social safety net. I'm going to choose not for a command economy because that doesn't work really well. Or somebody, like, very early in the movement, somebody's like, we should control the economy, and somebody's like, you can't make no money that way. So it's a free market communist economy. Capitalism is allowed to exist.
Private ownership's a thing.
Private ownership is a thing, but you are expected. You pay quite a bit of taxes. So it basically is like really early European social states. But so this is like 50, 100 years later. This communist country has survived, and because of the investments that it's making in its people, it's starting to outcompete everybody else. Nobody else can keep up with them for industry. They're getting rich really, really fast. I can't believe I just said that about communism. But their economy continues to grow. And so in response to this, all of the surrounding kingdoms and the Pope have to figure out, okay, well, they're kicking our butt, so how are we going to be able to compete with this? And so it kicks off kind of um, intellectual and social arms race, like who can build their society faster, who can build it better, faster, and you get to see whether feudalism wins or communism wins.
So it's like a Renaissance race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that in mind, I will progress the history forward a little bit, and while they're competing, this imaginary nation we have created drastically outperforms its contemporaries, and the response to that is total war. They all gang up on our poor little, or large, doesn't matter, communist country. And
So are you talking total war, like war on the civilian population, or just on the military? Because that total war means something very specific.
that's true, and I know that, and I can't believe I said it. You know what? I'm gonna actually go with total war. They're trying to they're
Eradicate the idea.
they're attacking the system, and to attack the system, you have to attack people. So they're going all in, and I will say for the first decade or so, it's even matched, and I will hand off to Nex.
So, question: is the total war on both sides, or is it just total war against communism? Communism responding back and saying, "Well, if they're going to try to wipe out us completely, are we going to try to wipe out their civilian centers as well?"
It's up to you.
Okay. I'm going to say at first, the communism, they have like a pride and they associate themselves back with Rome. And they're saying like this is the natural evolution, going back, this is, the empire maybe was like we're embracing some of the concepts, we're also correcting some of the concepts. And so they hold themselves to a higher moral standard, and they try to force the horrors of the war, which they can do because at like this point there's not going to be like it's hard to travel very quickly. Horrors of the war on just the forefronts, and try to preserve the civilization, the populace near the center of their communist empire of sorts. So almost like the normal day-to-day people near the center are almost unaware that there is a war on the edges. They know like there are increased taxes, and they know that people are leaving the city, but that's about it. There's not like any big war stories are coming in or anything like that. They're trying to preserve, and from that, in this kind of this idealized society that the government keeps trying to force in, a major movement social idea is the super intellectual, super academic that get so pure in their pursuits they're trying to like divorce themselves from forms of government and communism. So they're almost like they're not trying to get in the way of the communist movement, but they consider them a separate society within the borders, because they're allowed to live in this plush life this idealized life that the government is trying to fund money into and fund resources to preserve. So
a quick clarifying question on technology. This is all pre-wireless telegraphy, airplanes, and
so
right?
maybe within 150 years this causes those things to be discovered. I mean, initially when I announced this technology, I didn't say what era or what year they actually came about. I just said, and in this world, these three technologies came about at the same time without gunpowder coming around. So maybe they came around the next 100 years. Maybe they're so. Monica, I believe, is next. Is that right?
Yeah, so let's talk about without gunpowder, because we're having a major war here without one of the tools of modern warfare that allows you to have major wars as opposed to sequences of skirmishes, of battles, even major battles. So we've got our communist good guys who are pulling in, and the war. They're so they are being attacked. They're being attacked by their neighbors. And the people closer to the border are the ones being directly affected to this, because it's not like you can just fly in and drop bombs, right? You can't fly in. You can't. You don't have tanks rolling in. You don't even have guns for weapons at high speed and distance. So we're talking about infantry. We're talking about archers, crossbows, things of that sort, which Cavalry, yeah, which can be very deadly, and they don't. The ripples, the effects don't move as quickly as a modern war that can just kind of sweep over an area. So, I mean, I'm massively oversimplifying because when you get into an urban fight, you can be there for years, as we're seeing in the real world, right? But yeah, it's interesting to think about medieval style battles with cavalry and flanks and archers trying to conquer all of Europe. Because I mean, they're trying to wipe out this communist center that is developed. So they're coming in from all over. You don't have easy coordination. You don't have those satellite communications to, okay, I'm on this one front, we're ready to go now. So it's going to be more chaotic. It's going to do a lot of localized damage, but we're not going to have big bombs and stuff. So you have to go through to reach the center. You can't go over or go past.
One quick comment before Green, just considerations. Since we're talking about war, I meant to mention it. So in a situation where all the soldiers can talk easily and naturally behind the commander officer's back, without the commanding officer at all being aware, and they can do this at any time, what does that do to the face, the nature of warfare? When the commanding officer cannot, wouldn't have, discipline would just be a completely different concept, since there's one part of discipline he really can never enforce. Besides just hoping that everyone, tells another person. Like, oh, he's communicating behind your back, so...
Yeah, that's never going to happen.
Yeah,
what armies do today is they essentially try to beat that subversion out of you in boot camp, because the perfect soldier is the one who simply listens and takes an order and does what he's supposed to do, right? That's what they're trying to build in armies. So it's an interesting question. How much of this talking behind the commander's back would you have? On the other hand, when you do have it, it's really, really way more dangerous than anything we have now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would make it a lot harder to find somebody's secret plans or things along that line, just because your commander tells your messenger, hey, here's what's going on, and guy walks down the street. He doesn't have a uniform, maybe he doesn't have secret plans in his pocket. You can't really pick the guy up and say, you know something, because how would you know?
Right. Or you just kill everybody.
Well, right, that's kind of what they're doing. But...
Yeah.
All right, Green, you're up.
So, as Monica was describing the state of warfare, I was trying to pick out what kind of military technology would have been in use during this big war between the commies and the feudis. There's no gunpowder, which means there's no mortars, there's no cannon, which means that the old school Norman style castles are still useful. You can still build big, high walled fortresses, and they're totally effective. Because the biggest thing that you've got is a gravity feed trebuchet, and those are scary, but you don't have, you don't see the evolution of fortresses from these big tall things down into these flat things with angled sides, so that the cannonballs just kind of bounce off and go nowhere. As for communication, depending on, it wouldn't take very much experimentation to find out how far the maximum range for the shortwave, the short-range telegraphy, or the short-range telepathy. So what you could do is set up a mesh of people who all know each other. They're all in the signal corps, and they know the people, the next guy up the chain. And so it's, hey, here's this message, send it on. And then they just boom, 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 boom. So there is a certain amount of latency between the verbal or the mental processing of message in, message out to the next guy up the chain. But that's way faster than putting a guy on a horse and then sending him out.
Yeah.
So
way safer, harder to intercept. Yeah.
I mean, you can attack the signal network just as you can always attack signal networks, but it's much more resilient, especially if you've got like multipath. I mean, it's kind
Yeah, it's
of
like the
early
resilience of the internet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's less obvious that a signal is being sent right now as compared to the guy running through, running down the path on the horse.
Right.
It's like, yeah, take that guy out.
right. And so you can conceivably you could coordinate really large scale assaults. And if
You'd
communism
you'd probably still use triggers like sunrise or sunset or
sure,
high
but you don't
noon
have
or-
to.
We do have wireless. So if we were going to trigger, we can still do wireless Morse code, which militaries are going to be able to use. I don't know. When are we introducing this? When does technology come in? We didn't decide.
We don't need to.
Okay, well, it may or may not affect the warfare.
Right.
Timelines get complicated.
Right.
But we might end up just like leaving our world in flames to be continued in the next episode. Who knows?
Yeah,
We'll
I
figure
think
it out
it's-
between now and then.
I think it's about that time.
Yeah.
So we've got, let's see, we have developed a world where effective socialism came about much earlier than it ever did in real life. Technologies came about simultaneously, and there was no gunpowder, and
That's such an interesting twist. Very nice, next.
Humans are telepathic.
They're
And-
probably the biggest one.
And then you've got the church and the bulk of Europe ganging up on this large communist state and getting into a war where castles still matter. I like it. That's a world you could tell a story in.
Yeah. Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
And speaking of stories, so we invited Monica to join us.
Because she's
I think-
awesome.
Yeah. I mean,
And she's the moderator. And we're trying to earn brownie points. So
brownie points. Yeah, I just did it. I just did it for the brownie points. No, so the idea is.
You think there are actual brownies involved? Wow.
Oh man, brownies sound
There
really
aren't?
Yeah.
All right. So anyway,
We'll send you a picture of brownies later. Yeah.
perfect.
Right
We'll
here
just-
in the podcast. Brownie.
James is desperately trying to get the podcast back on track.
Focus, people. Focus. All right. Are we good? Okay. So
Brownies.
So we invited Monica because of the many of us on the site. She's one of the few that has actually demonstrated that she's actually putting the questions she asks to use in developing a story in a world that's actually seeing actual use. So she has written how many chapters now? 14, 15?
I think. I think 8 have been published so far. There's one more that isn't out yet.
Okay.
And there will be more, but I'm sort of one ahead right now. But I think 8 have been published.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we will make sure the link to the blog is in the description again, so you can find Monica's works there, and we'll put a direct link to the first story because they're all linked together, right?
Sure.
The-
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you can read through her story there, but we wanted her. So Monica, if you would, can you briefly introduce your world? Give us an idea of how it functions and what some of the main players are.
Yeah, so the story is called The Sisters' War. When I first started publishing it, it was called Sisters. I'm bad at holding names, and one of the things that you discover is you start publishing it, and then you realize you want to change it. It's like, well, all right.
And you can.
So, well, you can. You just go back and edit history. But anyway, the sort of seed for this idea was, I had been thinking about religious systems, polytheistic systems, and how a lot of them, either you've got your pantheon that is working together, or you've got well, this area has these gods and this area has these gods, and maybe they're similar, or maybe they're totally different. But I found myself thinking about primitive societies that worship things they see in the sky on a world with multiple moons. And so I thought, well, instead of having the sun god and the moon god, you might have multiple moon gods. And then I wondered what it would be like if those moon gods were competing with each other. Not not working together, but sort of power struggle among the moon gods, or at least this is how the people in the society perceive it. I've been deliberately not explicit about how powerful the gods actually are. The story is focusing on a people that is divided into tribes. I think of them like castes, clans, three of them, one per moon god. Somewhere along the line, I decided that the moon gods were goddesses, and that they therefore have priestesses. I wasn't trying to do a gender thing; it just kind of grew this way, and I figured, well, hey, let's roll with it. So I have a fairly primitive society living, isolated from other societies. So they live on, a group of small islands out in the ocean somewhere. I wanted water because I wanted disruptions from tides because of multiple moons, and that's actually what led me to ask. That's what led me to actually ask my first question, because I wasn't sure whether it was a simple matter of force and counterforce, or whether tides were more complicated with multiple moons. So I asked this question: how do tides work on a planet with multiple moons? Do they directly offset each other? And I got a really nice answer that explained how to work out the orbits and figure out, based on their different masses and their distances, how big or small the sine waves would be, and then you do sine wave math, and this gave me a working model of how these moons might move around, and how that might be affecting these people who live at water. On a chain of islands where that's really going to be matter. And part of the reason it matters is I'm then introducing a fourth body. So there are three moons and three moon goddesses until there aren't. And yes, and yeah, and what exactly that is, I haven't revealed yet. Though people who browse through my questions probably can see where I might be going with it. But that led to asking a question about okay, you've got an established religion in a closed system. This is not a people that are trading with others and hearing other ideas, right? And their pantheon changes, and how should I expect people to react to this? And again, got some very good answers. One of which pointed out that how the laity react, how the just plain folks react, might be different from how the people driving the power structure react, and how the priests or equivalent are going to shape things, and some of this is coming out now in the story. I've had I think of it as a 3-arc story, and chapters 1 through 6 were the first arc. So we're in the second arc now, where we've laid out the problem. Now we're starting to see consequences, and I'm really trying to tell a story about a society. I needed a world in which to do it, and I needed a world that made sense, and that's really where this came from.
Very nice.
Cool.
So you've got 4 goddesses. Well, 3, and one just shows up to wreck the whole party.
Yeah.
So is your world, and I guess if you're holding on to some of your secrets, you can feel free to throw that card out here, so you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But I guess so. I read through probably the first. I read through the entire first arc, and I got through I think one post on the second arc before this evening. And I want to know the answer, but I don't know if you're going to tell me.
Well, you can ask the question, and I'll decide how much of the answer to tell you.
So you have your priestesses who perform rituals, who are mages, for lack of a better term, priests, clerics, whatever you want to call them. Is magic a thing in your world or not? I have had trouble, and I don't know if that's on purpose or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, magic is not a thing, and the people think that the people, including the priestess themselves, think they have more power than they actually do. And I'm going to limit how much more I say in that direction. But it's not a magic-based world.
So
Okay.
I mean, this might be into the realm that you can't talk about. But does that mean that the goddesses are not real? Or do you mean magic's not real? Do you mean supernatural is not real? Or do you mean something like
What I mean is that
spellcraft?
human-controlled magic is not real.
Okay.
That something like, okay, I am now going to invoke the power of my goddess to cause this effect. It's much more it's more about praying to the gods to do the thing, praying to the goddesses to do the thing that you're trying to get them to do. It's not spellcraft. Yeah.
Okay.
Did that help, or did that make it worse?
No,
It may turn out that we just invited you here to pimp you for questions on your story that we want to know the answer to that you're not going to share.
Well, this is really cool because, you put things out there and you have no idea if people are actually reading and enjoying, or if it's just, oh yeah, well, she's a moderator, so we have to tolerate her putting stuff on our blog,
Oh no, it's so let me ask you, of the characters you have, so you've got let's see, 3 priestesses, 1 for each of your deities, and then I believe there were some warlords, correct?
Yes.
So what's their role?
So each clan has a warlord. The clans are, as I said, competing with each other, and the clan of Dal is the main goddess that we've seen so far, and they are dominant over everybody else. They're bigger, they're stronger, and they have the big goddess on their side. And the other 2 clans are not so thrilled about this. They try to avoid outright war, but sometimes you need force, and so each clan has essentially has developed somebody who is, there's not a military per se, but somebody who will go and be the thug and has other folks who will work for him. And I have not developed this as fully as I would like to have developed it. But the warlord has a position of honor within each of the clans. And one thing that you may have noticed in the story actually is that the smallest, weakest clan is Mel, and their warlord. You never actually see him do anything that involves might. He's our master of subversion. He's the guy who goes and whispers. He whispers in the right person's ear, and in the latest chapter when we have one of our characters. So one of the priestesses in Dal is now out of favor with the high priestess, and so when her family goes to collect their share of some of the resources, because this is more communal living style, and the guy in charge of the storeroom says, no, you can't have. Sorry about that, but the guys in charge told me no, and I'm not going to go against them. It was actually it was actually Mel who caused the right whispering in the right ears to happen, and actually, that guy at the storeroom was never actually told by, that idea did not originate within Dal, but it's the sort of thing that would really look like it should have. And if you create a little more strife, Mel is trying to break Dal from the inside by pitting some of them, by pitting them against each other.
Very nice.
You just saw my cat's tail go by, I think.
That's all right.
Yeah. So each of them has each of them has a different approach. Dal is big, strong, and presumptuous, and they might have trouble hanging on to power in the end. Mel is subversive, and Sav is in the middle. Would like to see Dal fall and replace them.
So, question for me. Question and a follow-up question. First question is, how much of the world did you have, both in breadth and depth, figured out before you started writing your story?
Oh, just enough to get going, really. I started writing once I understood how the moons and the tides worked. I had this image in my head of how the society would look. Somewhere along the line I decided they were, a fairly primitive society. I think in the very first chapter I got some of the technology wrong, and I've just been trying to ignore it and move on, and if there's a second edit I will fix it. Right, right. But the other thing is, as I was writing, I would realize that questions would come up, and I would need to get an answer to them, and sometimes it was just, okay, I'm going to sit down and reason this through. I have a scene where they're eating dinner. Okay, what do they eat? Are they cooking individually, or are they like communal ovens, or what? And I just came up with something that worked, that seemed consistent with what I know of Earth history, because not that this isn't Earth, obviously, but when in doubt, draw from our own history, because at least it worked once. So some of it is, it's only when I'm writing that I realize there's some detail that I need, and at that point I have to go and figure it out. So the broad strokes about the moons, about the religions, about the clans fighting each other, about this idea of the warlord, that was there pretty early on, and the plot device that is coming up in the very next chapter, that was planned in from the beginning. But, well, just as a hint, this is a small island people. We should not make assumptions about the rest of the world, now should we?
Is somebody, just really quick, is somebody banging? Because I can
Oh,
hear,
I think it's
like,
a
that might be my cat. Excuse me
Okay.
a moment. Let me...
Yeah, I heard the scritch, 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 scritch.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that was coming through. Let me remove him then. Okay.
All right,
You.
we'll take a quick break here. Art.
Well, I've just tossed him off the table, so
Okay.
All right.
I'm back now.
Yeah. Mine,
Okay.
Mine does that.
If he does that again, I will take. If he does that again, I'll take stronger action. But I think right
Okay.
now.
All right. So let's see here.
I had a follow-up question, just real quick.
Oh, that's right. Follow-up
Sure.
question. Go ahead.
Okay, so obviously that's very much contrast to the three other us, which were very, very front heavy to the point we'd not even started our applications. I don't think any of us have.
I technically have started mine, but it's not real. Yeah.
It's
Okay,
just
right.
20,000 words of not real.
Yeah.
Oh
Hold
yeah,
on.
you said that. Yeah, but you said it's mostly almost to flesh out your world more.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll go ahead and ask one your question.
So obviously your approach is very, very agile because you're just making the world as you're going along, as you need to apply it. One, was that intentional, and two, are you glad you doing it that way?
So part of it. So intentional
Like,
in
did
the
you
sense of
choose, like,
I'd
this is a
like
good way
to.
of doing it?
Yeah. Right. It was more that I was thinking, gee, I'd like to actually write this story someday, and if and I worried that I was going to bog down in trying to research and make the world perfect before I started telling the story. So in that sense, it was intentional, and yeah, there's if I were doing this and not publishing it as I went along, then in one way that would be even better because I could go backwards if I had to and go back and fix things. But there's something about the pressure of actually putting it out there one chapter at a time that means okay, I'm going to get some things wrong, and that's going to have to be okay. So it won't be as perfect a world as it could be. On the other hand, the story's getting written, and I actually find that working toward putting the next chapter out there as opposed to just writing the next chapter on my hard drive and waiting until there's a finished thing to share with anybody, I find that that's actually driving me, and that building as I go is a necessity in order to be able to do that. And it seems to be working reasonably well for me. From my perspective, how well it's working for my readers, we'll find out. But it's working for me because I feel like I'm being able to develop things as I need them, leave things unspecified until I need to specify them, and actually get going.
Yeah, so like I said, I've read through most of it, and I haven't noticed any glaring inconsistencies or contradictions in basic functions or systems. So, yeah, it seems to be working at this point for you. So, yeah, I like it. Which is why I absolutely had to ask you if magic was a real thing, because I was like, I can't tell. I really want to know. I was hoping it was a big secret you were going to reveal it. And I was going to know. and nobody
I'm
else
sorry.
Except
Yeah.
for the entire internet.
Yeah, it wasn't meant. That was not meant to be a big tease. There are other things in here that were meant to be a tease.
Well, for
but
the record, except for the 100 people that are going to watch this, you can probably get away with that, making that a big tease, and then just dropping a huge bomb at the end.
yeah.
You could probably get away with that. So let's see. So would you say then that you probably started you started from characters and a story idea and then built the world around that, or was it you had a concept or like a brief stroke of the world where you have multiple moons for multiple deities and that was the starting point? I guess where did you start?
Yeah,
Where did you get the kickoff from?
I kind of had this scene in my head that involved some some setting, the competitive polytheists from early on, and some individual characters and where I wanted the story to go. And those kind of all came together quickly enough that I can't really say what order they happened in. It wasn't intentional. It was that, I was thinking about, I was, just having one of these, afternoons sit and noodle around in your head things that introverts do. And I said, oh, well, that would be cool. Let's explore that idea a little bit. And so it came from, the beginnings of a setting, the beginnings of a plot, and the beginnings of characters kind of all at the same time. And then I needed to make the world rich enough to support that.
That makes sense. All right, I think that pretty much covers my questions for Monica. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to ask about the world?
No.
Actually, just a kind of generic advice or question. If you right now could give advice to yourself right before you started writing down anything, is there any advice, generic or specific, you'd give yourself?
That's a good question. I would probably tell myself to actually sit down and work out the calendar on paper. Because, you've got 3 moons and they're on different cycles, and it's actually significant, which ones are full when, in terms of the religion of the story. And I'm doing a lot of, okay, has enough time passed for that to work yet? And I should have just developed the calendar, as an artifact early on. That would have helped me. That's very specific to this story. But in general, there were. I started out with some small ideas of how things in the society might work, many of which never actually went anywhere and probably aren't going to go anywhere. And if I could tell myself, if I could talk to my earlier self, I would say, think about them a little more, decide which ones are important, and build them out fully. And let some of the other stuff just go.
That's
so I can
probably
actually
really good advice.
almost both those advices are almost the same thing. It's examine your world, examine the story you're taking with it, and figure out what parts you really do need to develop. Don't just develop for the sake of development is always just, for a world builder it's fun. But make sure you do examine, where am I going with this? What details are significant? What do I really need to figure out? Make sure I do actually figure that stuff out and put my focus on that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. And just one small example of that, I had this idea with character naming. Yeah, so all of the gods have 1-syllable names, right? Because that's sort of like the primordial name. It's just one sound. Dal, Sav, Mel. And so I had this notion that, people not being perfect, clearly could never have a 1-syllable name. You're not going to have Bobs in this world.
That's actually pretty cool.
The initial set of characters ended up all having 2-syllable names. And you probably you may or may not have noticed that the high priestess of Dal, her name is of a different form than the others because it's Dara. Well, her name is actually Ara, but she's the high priest, so she's Dara for Dal, and the high priests of the other two get that prefix as well. And I found myself thinking about, well, there might be other prefixes that other name annotations, so to speak, name modifications that might come into play, and I never really went anywhere with it. I have not named any of the warlords, and part of it is I was worried about having too many players for people to keep track of at the rate the story is getting published, and I didn't want to maintain a cast of characters as a separate thing. I figure if I have to do that, I'm not telling my story well. So I fuzz around names sometimes. I don't name people unless I need to, but I could have thought through a better naming scheme, I think, for the characters.
Until you just said it, it did not occur to me that you hadn't named the warlords, but now that you mention it, they're always referred to as the warlord of the deity. Which is kind of a
some
cool
of
way
that
to do it. You could.
I was trying to be a little mysterious at the beginning. The first time I had the two of them meeting, and I said I'm not going to introduce 2 new characters in the last scene of this chapter, so I'll just be mysterious, the warlord of Sav and the warlord of Mel, and then it's kind of stayed there, and then I kept doing it. And I realized that it was easier that way.
So you mentioned that you're working on it with a caste system in mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could, if you wanted to, you could almost treat that position as its own caste. So you forego, you could say that they forego their own name in the service to their church.
That's true. Yeah.
So then their name literally would be the Warlord of.
I like that.
You could actually go that route, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. And so, there's a question of, they had names before and they've set them aside. So, yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I mean,
so
and that
might
trope shows
just
up
do that.
a lot in other stories, in other worlds.
This is true, yeah.
It's a
you
cool
take on a
one.
role. It's a role, and you are the role, and therefore your individual identity just doesn't matter as much.
You are the Batman.
Yeah. Or even you are the king. You're not King James or King Green or King Nex. You're just the king, right?
I mean, the Pope.
Yeah. The Pope.
Popes do that.
Pope takes on a new name. They take new names. Yeah. So their original identity
Never really
is
understood
set
that.
aside.
I'll have to read into that sometime.
It has to do with saints, but
Right. Right. Okay, so let's see here. That's all. Is there anything else you wanted to share in particular that we hadn't covered, Monica?
I can't think of anything. No.
Okay.
It's a cool story.
with that-
You should read it.
Check it
Yeah.
out on the Medium blog.
It's not back there next. It's down here.
In
Okay,
the doobly-doo.
yeah, whatever.
Always
So yeah,
down.
no, Articode, I want you to put a little box to click right here, so I can prove you
I
wrong.
see
Can't
how it
actually
is.
see
I
that.
see how it is.
Don't
All right,
do
let's
that.
move along. So next on the
Articode,
agenda.
snip that.
You know what? Leave it all in because I don't know. We'll figure it out later. All right. So moving along, we're gonna talk now about a couple of questions from the site. Monica, would you like a break from reading?
Sure.
conversations
Yeah.
for a
Somebody
minute?
else
Okay.
should go. Yeah.
All right. So let's.
I'll go first.
You want to go first, Nick? All right.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
So link to the question is in the doobly-doo. But the question is, what would a battle between supercomputers be like with the battleground being the internet? So special characteristic of all the questions, I think all the questions that we're going to share, is that on Stack Exchange, on the world building website, these questions were actually closed because the way they were written is too broad, meaning there's way too many, well, it depends. If you say this thing is this way, then it's this answer. If you say it's this way, then it's this answer. Generally, those questions get closed because it's really hard to pick the one best answer. But since we're talking about it, this is a better format to talk about questions that are too broad because we can do whatever we want. Whereas on world building, that doesn't happen. Anyway, so what would a battle be like between two supercomputers? It really depends on what depends on what programming those supercomputers have. If they're designed to be just regular like scientific computing, then the battle doesn't look like a whole lot. But if they are loaded up with Metasploit and they're told to go root every system on the internet that they can get hold of, then the world's going to look very, very different. So I answered this question before it was closed, and my answer was it's either going to be two things. Nothing's going to change. No one will ever know other than the people sitting in front of the computers like, what the heck is this doing? Or it's going to go the opposite direction and basically the internet stops. Power plants go offline, chemical plants go offline. The internet, the world of Internet of Things goes completely nuts. Everybody's webcams start doing weird things.
Start turning around like they're in an episode of.
Yeah.
The head goes all the way around.
Yeah, I can't do that.
Exorcist, yeah. Yeah.
But so what makes this question so variable is what's the actual capabilities of these supercomputers? Is it just that they're really fast and they can do lots of things at the same time, or is it they can do lots of things, but they're also trained to be malicious, and that wasn't listed in the question. So
are we talking about are we talking about like an AI, or are we talking about humans using supercomputers for nefarious?
Let me look at the
two-
question really quick. I don't
you-
think it says.
Oh,
Um,
that's interesting.
AI sounds more interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because if it's humans, it's going to be like we have supercomputers today,
Right.
and we have people who try to hack other people and secure systems. So it would look like cybersecurity today, which is somebody in cybersecurity. It's, I guess, interesting,
Right.
but it's not interesting like world building. Interesting, I guess.
I agree.
So reading over the question really quick, it looks like these supercomputers have some really good deep learning and pattern recognition of previous attacks because it can recognize movements and it can prepare for different kinds of attacks. And then there's a big long list of other criteria that I'm not going to bother to go through.
Oh, hey, the last criteria is there's absolutely no intervention from humans.
So
So let's go with AI.
That, yeah,
So-
let's go
okay,
with AI.
so-
That could be really interesting.
as somebody in cybersecurity, like the big way you get malicious software or you infest a system, network, whatever, is humans. You
find the weak link.
Yeah, you find
Yeah.
humans are the weak points.
Social
Like you almost
engineering, man.
social phishing, whatever it is. You completely remove humans, it becomes really, really hard to like maliciously invade a properly configured network. Especially if these supercomputers are aware of how things. They should be able to pretty well lock down their system. So now it's basically a brute force attack. And there was an attack recently, and I got a name. I don't remember what the name is. But basically, some company went and hacked DVRs, TVs, cameras are hooked to the internet, and just various just devices, didn't matter what they were, that could connect to the internet, and use them as the most massive distributed denial of service attack ever. And just it was actually this guy's security blog who's famous in the community, and I don't remember his name. But anyways, they just poured so much information at him that like this major company that like hosted web services and held actually proxies stepped in.
It was Dyn, wasn't it?
What?
It was Dyn.
Yeah.
DYN? Yeah.
Dyn stepped in
Yeah.
like, okay, so we're
Yeah.
massive. We'll be able to like stay
Yeah.
off the attack. We'll do it for free because you got such a great bot. They couldn't do it. So the supercomputers would go, I'm not going to get past systems. Either I want to somehow configure routers or something just to shut him off the internet and isolate him, or I want to bombard him with so much stuff he has to basically shut himself off. So that's going to be the two fronts, is they're going to try to get, as far as a battlefront on the internet, that's like they're trying to claim territory. They're trying to claim as many devices as possible. And then when they see somebody else, him claim, because I don't know if you can really secure a webcam or stuff, like how much you could really do as far as remotely. So it'd be like, if he can get in, well, is there a way I can figure out how to cut him off? That his network doesn't connect, or that I can get in and establish connection to that device. And so it actually could be kind of a metaphoric battleground for all of these billions of devices that you could hack into.
So the outstanding, interesting question to me is obviously why. Like, what's the goal?
Oh,
Why do
I have
humans
an answer
fight?
for that.
Oh.
So let's see. So humans live. I mean, all of human history is full of people saying, "You have stuff, food, cool toys, whatever, and I want it, so I'm going to come kill you."
Or ideology.
Ideology, yeah, it's true too. Oh, maybe they're fighting because one of them is big Endian and the other one is little Endian. And they're like, no, most significant bit, no, least significant bit. Anyway,
Your nerd is showing.
I can't help it. But the one great
Either that or one of them is saying, that invention of emoji, you're going too far, we're done.
That could
But
be it.
for computer I/O, whether that's CPU I/O, disk I/O, or network I/O, those are the three permanently limited resources. You can never, like, once you max that out on a machine, it's maxed. Unless you buy new hardware or something, like, that's it. That's your limited resource. So these supercomputers would be looking for additional I/O, CPU, and network bandwidth to carry out whatever task it is that keeps them alive. And so when they're, as Nex says, like, you're trying to shut off the opposing supercomputer so they can't use webcams, they can't use these things, it's doing that because it wants those compute resources for itself to do whatever it needs to do.
So how about a situation where uh, you started with human-run supercomputers and they had a goal, whatever it was, is no longer relevant. Um, and then with the quantity and the spread of electronic devices all over the planet that are all hooked wirelessly, you could actually get a scenario where the network becomes its own brain.
If you could get the software to run on it, absolutely.
So you could actually have a distributed brain on a network, right? So if the supercomputer is able to pool and control all the resources, you would actually have the number of connections and the complexity needed to perhaps gain sentience or sapience.
Right.
So I'm gonna get the numbers horribly wrong, and some kind of CS guy is gonna say, I'm the bane of the internet. But it's something like, so he's like going from CPU to the first level of cache to going up to then to the second and third. It's like thousands of times slower, and then going to RAM, it's tens of thousands times slower, and then going to, or no, it's 1,000 times slower than even just going to the cache, and then it's tens of thousands times slower going from RAM to the hard drive, and I imagine network is a similar thing. So we're talking about millions or billions of times slower to get between devices. Because compared to CPU getting to cache, it wouldn't be a traditional idea of a brain. It would be more like ant colony or something like it's organisms that work together, but they don't really need to share all of the information.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah. So next, usually you can buy RAM. It's like I think on cache, it's like sub nanosecond, or on the CPU die, it's like sub nanosecond. It's like 5 nanoseconds about-ish to get to RAM. Hard drive is like microseconds, depending on how things worked out. And then it's milliseconds or longer to go out to the network. So, I mean, you've covered 6 or 9 orders of magnitude in speed difference. So that gets really slow. But you don't, assuming that if we take our own human brains as models, neurons back here don't talk directly to neurons up here. They just kind of spread info around. And individual neurons are really, really simple. What we're interested in is the higher level patterns that emerge from those neurons talking to each other. So it doesn't have to be this fully fledged, each node is crazy, crazy smart. We're looking for emergent patterns above the individual node level, which
and you're going to have clusters of processing.
Right.
So they only have to talk at the interface points. It's not a many to many, every neuron, every node talking to every other neuron or every other node. It's these guys here are going to do work on this thing, and these guys are going to do work on this thing, and they'll talk to each other.
Right.
So assuming that we wish both supercomputers the best of luck, and they both get the higher level network thought processes going on, how does that help or affect the war?
Oh, yeah, right. The whole point of the question.
Picky.
I'm
so
sorry.
I don't know if it does. Honestly, I don't know if it does. But it feels like a natural evolution in that process would be the more hardware and processing power you take over.
So would that be an ideology maybe thing? Like, I want to maintain my brain, I want to hurt their higher level thinking, because I know it's not morale hurt, but it consumes the resources that they're concerned about establishing this higher level. That's a way I can, maybe something like that.
Right.
That makes sense to me.
Like what's a supercomputer's motivation? People go to war because there are resources they want, or there are ideologies they want to spread, or there are people they really, really hate. So I don't know if supercomputers can hate. If it's a matter of I want to destroy this one, resources beyond the resources that you need in order to fight the war. I control more hardware and therefore I can throw more against this other guy. Well, if you weren't fighting the other guy, would you need the additional hardware anyway?
Right.
Are you competing for resources, or are you fighting a war, and because you're fighting a war you need resources? Those are different. Those are different states.
Well, the spirit of the original question, that they studied the malicious attacks, maybe their initial programming, which their bias should be like, why they function, is there to defend against cybersecurity incidents and there to launch cybersecurity incidents or a lot of attacks. So that's their motivation, is just simply, oh, here's a target, I want to implant things so I can get information of a system and control a system because that's what I do. That's what I was designed to do, and I'm trying to prevent those same things. So it's not even like really a motivation, it's just their inherent design.
Okay.
That seems like a good...
So, to riff on that a little bit more, if the supercomputers, if they're made as a kind of new age digital immune system, then if there's no halt to the, okay, well, I see this system attacking me, so I'm going to take it over. I take it over, and I see something attacking that. I mean, unless there's a way to halt that, then it's naturally going to propagate across the entire network, and there's not really a whole lot you can do about it. I mean, other than securing your stuff like intelligent people do.
Passwords, man.
Yeah. But globally, you'll see everybody's computers are going to run really slow. Everybody's networks are going to run really slow. I mean, that's what it'll look like to humans.
Yeah, humanity does not fare well in this scenario.
No.
Yeah. And by the time they realize that maybe they really do need to actually take, home network security into account, it's kind of too late. Because it's not that people don't choose good passwords and don't have good, security protocols because they're stupid. It's because it's hard. It is hard enough that you do what you need to do in order to get by, and then the rules change and suddenly what you were doing was completely inadequate. Remember when 8 characters in a number was enough for a password? Well, that hasn't been true for a while, but people operate at the level that is good enough because it's a cost-benefit analysis. It's a trade-off.
So I will say that some people are ignorant because there's been tests sent that's emails that say, this is a phishing email, this is a security test, do not click the following link, this is the link you're not supposed to click. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but they're like that explicit, and they have users click the link.
Yeah, sure. There are always going to be some people like that.
I mean, like,
I'm just saying that not everybody who has stupid has weak passwords is stupid. Some of them are just lazy is different from stupid. Lazy is different from stupid.
And you can't fix stupid. You can fix lazy. You can't fix stupid.
You can teach better practices. Yeah.
All
right. So that's my question.
That was a good question.
So next, you want to introduce yours?
Okay. And I'm mostly going... He had the original author of the question. Let me bring up his name. Tristan Klassen. I might butcher the pronunciation. He has a little bit of a write-up. I'm going mostly off of the title, because actually it's something that I worked through myself. His title is, If Magic is Real, Can It Be True That Rational Scientific Thought Should Exclude It? And I would say, more broadly, if magic is undeniably true, like, we know it exists, what is the relationship between science and magic? Is magic even, is magic any different than just thermodynamics at that point?
So I guess it depends on how you want to define it. I mean, because in my head, magic, by definition, is
so I first defined...
Science and magic are... They're exclusive. They cannot be the same.
So define science first of all. I feel like because that's an easier thing to give a definition to. I have my own definition, which I'll give it. But does somebody else want to tackle it first?
I'll go.
Yeah, go ahead, Green.
So science is empirical observations about how the universe works. So if we observe that magic actually works, eventually it becomes magic. I mean, quantum physics
becomes science.
Is magic. It's magic, but it works, and we know how it works, and we know the laws that it works on, so the magic is science. I mean, eventually if you can figure out how something works and how it works consistently, and the laws that govern it, that's that's science by definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to me, science, just the written, reproducible, peer-reviewed description of reality.
Yep.
And so then anything that's part of reality that you can, review, you can have other people reproduce it and examine it, that falls underneath science, so any magic system, if it's part of reality, and it can be repeated, and it can be...
So not to be too semantic, but so there could be a science of magic, right?
Sure.
So you could have magicians get together and develop a science out of their art, out of their magical abilities. But magic in and of itself could still certainly defy the laws of physics, right? So
defy the known laws of physics.
What is physics?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Physics is a description peer-reviewed of reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think magic is, in a lot of cases, is going to be science we don't understand yet. So it's not yet science because we don't know how to measure it. We don't know how to do the experimental, reproducible work to derive the laws by which it operates. To me, as somebody else said, quantum physics, that's magic.
I like that.
Never mind that it has physics in its name. It's magic.
So quantum physics, I love it. So there are a rule, which I won't get super scientific, because I don't even... rules that define how quantum mechanics work, and they are not the same rules that define how macroatomic works, or whatever the word it would be. They're different sets of rules, but we both know we're fairly certain that these rules are correct, and we're still trying to find out a solid universal thing that applies to everything, and we haven't quite hammered it out, but we're like, it's reality, we're just making a description. Eventually, theoretically, we understand reality enough, we're going to make that over. We don't say, quantum mechanics betrays the rules of physics. Just because it can't work with our current model, it's just like, oh, well, our physics was wrong. Our peer-reviewed description was not describing properly. I was describing, a rainbow as something dark. And, oh, I found out it's not dark. I need to update my description. And that's just, to me, magic would just go into there. It's like, even if tomorrow we discovered magic was real in real Earth, scientists would be able to find it and reproduce it and say it betrays what we understood as thermodynamics, but we understand it's reality now. We need to say thermodynamics works in these systems and it doesn't apply to these systems, and we're trying to figure out why and what the overarching rules are. That's my opinion.
When a new phenomenon shows up, is discovered, whatever, when we don't yet understand it, we are more inclined to think of it as magical because it's mysterious. And as we come to understand it, it becomes science. And so I think the magic in your world, if it has a set of rules, if it is predictable, if it is something you can measure and analyze, it will eventually become science. And if the first time a wizard shows up and does a thing and nobody understands what he's doing and they say, ooh, magic, that's not the end state. But I think there's a transition where you get to science if there's any foundation there at all.
So James is the person who doesn't agree with the three of us. Do you want to say more?
I agree. I agree with the concept and the conversation, but so mine is a semantic definition argument, not a systemic. So by definition, in my head, magic is outside the realm of the laws of physics, right? So it calls upon something other than what is it requires a spiritual aspect, right? It requires a non-physical, non-material component.
So James, I think I might have a way to reconcile the three of our view and yours, and have it actually work out pretty nicely. So in quantum physics, there's this thing called the Planck length. It's the absolute smallest distance that science, as of right now, knows that we can measure. If there's anything below the Planck length, we cannot know about it, because everything else that we have is just so much bigger that you can never get the resolution that you need to look below that. There's also the Planck second, which is the smallest kind of time quanta. Like, you can't go smaller than a Planck second, and there's a bunch of math to describe why that is. But there's other stuff like string theory where the 3+1 dimensions that everyone's accustomed to living in is actually like 1 of 10 or 11, depending on which theory you're looking for. So, as far as we know, we don't have any way of probing those additional dimensions, but they may be real and make up a large portion of how reality works for us. So magic could live in all of those other dimensions, and they have a real effect on us, and we can measure that effect, but they're in a place that we can't probe with reality as we understand it. We just can't get to where we can say, oh, well, this magic proton reacts with this magic electron and it makes energy. Boom! We can't conduct those experiments because we can't get to a place where we could actually do anything with it.
Sure. And that is a reasonable argument or physical explanation for magic, yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Or you could just say magic is spiritual and then everyone knows what you're talking about.
That's my route. Because there are no rules in my personal magic system. It's all willpower based and story driven. So
a little bit different than Green's upcoming
plot
magic
armor.
System.
yeah.
Oh man,
All
I
right.
love that system so much. So
All right.
good.
Monica, did you want to introduce your question?
Yeah, sure. And even though I was the person who had originally suggested, hey, let's pick the questions that were closed as too broad and open-ended, the question that I actually wanted to highlight, because I think it's a really good use of our site, so a question that wasn't closed, and in fact has drawn a lot of positive attention, is the question: Can you add a mini moon to Earth? So this is somebody who wanted to. Yes.
Yeah, because it's yours.
Yes, I had totally not even noticed that it was asked by James when I was choosing this question, because I've been so focused on the answers, and so the question is, can you add a second moon that is smaller and that is farther outside the orbit than our moon, and is that stable? And the reason this question actually struck me is that it drew two very different answers. So first off, it's a question that asks for hard science. So this is a subcategory of questions on our site where we really expect you to show us your scientific, show us your derivation or your research. We're not looking for speculation here. We're looking for proofs. And so HDE posted a mathematical analysis where he concluded that this system can be stable, and there are I think when this actually gets put together, we will have on screen a subset of the math that is involved in this answer.
And
I do not understand all this. Yes, and and I'm looking at this, I'm trying to understand this answer, right? I sort of skip to the conclusion at the bottom because, like, I don't even know the names of some of these symbols in the math, right? But people who know the math have vetted this, and it is a very, very solid mathematical answer. And then we have an answer from, I need to refresh my memory of the guy's name, King Ledian, who simulated it. He wrote code to simulate this system with various parameters: placement, size of the moon's orbits, how eccentric the orbit was. And he came to the conclusion that, no, this is not stable, that there are a few different ways this can end, but mostly it ends with the small moon being kicked out. And that is not stable. And so HDE then looked at his results and he revisited his math. Are we still here? Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. I had a glitch here, so I wanted to make sure I was still connected to you guys.
You're good.
Okay. And so he responded to that by digging into his math a little more and concluding that maybe he was wrong in some of this. And I just love the dialogue that is happening, not from speculation, but from two scientists going at it, taking very different approaches to try to answer this question, which seems like fundamentally this is an answerable question. And now we've got two people with solid work behind them disagreeing, and I'm fascinated to see where this goes.
Yeah, and so honestly, the answers are far better than the question I wrote, which was very simple and came with a childlike drawing of orbits. My paint skills are amazing. But yeah,
Yeah, I have a series of questions with bad paint art too. So yeah.
Yeah, the answers it has drawn is kind of amazing. So yeah, that's a very good point about the site. Is you get all kinds of different. You never quite know what kind of answer you'll get. But when it comes to the sciences, we have some very talented folks on the site.
I had asked a question about a planet in a binary star system where the planet is orbiting one of the suns, and I was trying to understand the patterns of light over the course of the year and how the seasons would end up working. And I got this awesome answer from somebody who got the right software tool to just model it and drew these graphs of here's what the light patterns look like over the entire planet over the course of a year, when I was really hoping for, can somebody tell me what it looks like at solstices and equinoxes, and I'll interpolate from there. And it was just awesome. I was not expecting that at all.
I remember that question. The guy actually went on to share. He provided a link to his like workbook file, so you could download it and play with it yourself, which is
Yes. Very cool. Yes.
I mean, I've done the same thing with some of my answers, and it's really handy.
Absolutely. So, anything else on that one? I didn't think so. Okay. So the question I chose to briefly discuss, and this one shouldn't take too much time, is, and this is a different, so on the math side, when you have a question of physics or astronomy or whatever the case may be, we can get great answers for people. And then also in the case of process and how to manage and things like that, we can also do that very well. So the question I chose is, how can I develop names for my fantasy land, was the question. And the answer I wrote to this is, you can do it a lot of different ways. And some of the answers are, hey, create your own language. I am not patient enough personally to create my own language, nor am I probably smart enough to do that on my own. It seems like a lot of work. So the method I recommended was basically go out to Google Translate, pick a language that has the sound and flavor that you're looking for.
I remember that answer.
Yeah, so you can go out, and so the site is very good about finding people tools and processes for how to deal with situations that they're not quite sure how to approach. So there's been a lot of good questions in that regard, and I think we all have those. We have those all under world building process would be the tag. So if anybody's curious to look those up, as well as under resources. So so essentially what my recommendation was is pick a language and then go out and use Translate and find. I think the example that I gave was, you have a city on the side of a mountain and you want to come up with a good name for it. Pick a language. Drop in a few different words for mountain. You can use words like mountain or rock or hilltop or whatever the case may be, and then throw in some words for city, town, village, and get the translations, and then smash them together, mix and match, and find something that rolls off the tongue. Questions like that are well received on the site and provide value to people that come down the line afterwards. So that's one of the things we definitely try and do on the site is make sure that when we answer questions and when we put this work in, that somebody that comes down the road and has the same question can find it useful as well.
And this is actually after I saw this posted, and this is a context I don't remember exactly what context it was, but it was somebody having a discussion that sometimes that can be distracting for, like, if you picked, I don't know, Swedish or another language, and a reader is native in that language or very familiar with that language, sometimes they can pick it out. Like if somebody went and picked the word for an extreme and attractive and got very and beautiful, like in English, and put in very full, it looks kind of like an English. I mean, we would see that and we go,
Come on, man.
Yeah. Pick a language that you don't expect to be an audience. I guess probably for your, like, if you're writing for somebody that's been picked up by a lot of Spanish readers, and you're using Spanish, then it might not be a good,
Sure. Well, and if you're going to get translated into multiple languages, you're going to have an editor to manage that stuff anyway. I don't personally have to worry about being translated into multiple languages at this point.
Well, I think he meant not just actual translation, but if your market is going to have a lot of people
like a lot
who
of
speak
people
that
sell in
language, they're going to
Texas.
recognize it. Yeah,
There's
yeah.
gonna be
Like
a
if
lot of
you're going
people
to be selling,
understand
yeah,
Spanish in
yeah,
Texas that aren't, they're
yeah.
gonna read it in English just fine because they also know English, but they're gonna be, see the Spanish words stuck together, and you're like,
Oh yeah.
you called them ice cream what? And so yeah, they just said it was concerning. So just think about your target, who's going to be reading it, and just make sure you pick something that's sufficiently foreign. It's not like very few people would be upset by it.
Sure, sure. All right.
Or try to build things out of two languages where you smush them together, and that only kind of looks
Yeah.
like Swedish because the other part of it is Swahili.
So James
That would
actually
be-
gave. Sorry,
Go ahead.
I was going to say James has given a fantastic answer to that. Is there any other answers we have besides Google Translate? Which it's a good one, but it's like somebody comes listening to this and says, "I do not want to use Google Translate. What's my alternative?"
The best I've seen, and there's another question somewhere that I'll have to find, is basically you take sounds that you like or sound groupings, and you can actually have a macro go out and basically give you every possible combination of those, and then you can fit all those together and basically say, okay, that. And so rather than taking words, you're taking just sounds that the English or that the human mouth is capable of making, and you take and combine those sounds into words. That's a little bit more challenging, but it can be done.
So James, that was actually my answer.
Was it?
Yeah, that was mine. So a little
was a
bit
good
more
one.
detail. Thanks. There's the IPA, which is I think it's the International Pronunciation Alphabet or something. Basically, it's a list of every sound that the human voice, the human physiology is capable of making. And then you just go through, pick out sounds that you like. There's, I think in my answer, I pointed to a website. I think it's George Mason or George Washington University in Washington D.C. Like they went through and they cataloged the IPA charts for a ton of different languages. So you can go pick like, oh well, I really like Hungarian. So you go look at the IPA chart for Hungarian, and then after you've picked your sounds, then you can smush them together. And then come up with your own mapping for your own IPA chart with a language. If you want to build a basic language, oh, okay. Now I made me lose my train of thought. So James just sent me a
distracted him,
message
that's my fault.
about agenda stuff. So let's see.
Train. Oh yeah, now I completely lost it too.
Dang it. So you have
You were
the
talking
IPA
about
chart.
phonetic, yeah.
Oh, right. So there was a book by the guy who wrote XKCD. It's called Upgoer 5. And he described some really, really complicated technical concepts like a Saturn V rocket. And he used the 1,000 most common words. So if you want a very basic language, but still has plenty of capacity for expression, like you translate, you get the list of 1,000 most common words, and you just make translations between your language and the other language, and then you can make whatever you want after that. And it's fully fledged. It's has the expressive power of like a third grader, which is enough.
For fiction, yeah, I'd say.
Right.
Yeah.
And nobody's gonna know the difference.
Yeah, yeah. You're
That's a
talking
really
about
good point.
names. Yeah.
That is a really good point.
Right.
Did we mention XKCD in the first episode? I don't know that we did.
Probably. I would be very surprised if we didn't.
I've watched it several times just to make sure we weren't too terrible, and I don't recall us doing that. So at this point in time, I'd like to say XKCD is amazing, and if you don't appreciate it, well, I don't know why you're watching, because
So I will say that people who start at the very start of XKCD can be turned off of it because he definitely changes his style during the
Oh, for
early
sure.
first 100 strips. So if you ever read XKCD from the start and you turned off of it, try reading some of his more modern stuff, and you might
Yeah.
get a different appreciation.
try from now and go backwards. It's easier.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
But
so go ahead next.
no, go on. It's not important.
Okay, so let's finish out the evening with a random recommendation. It can be a book. It can be a
Whiz biz.
game. Hold on. It can be a book. I knew you were going to say that. It can be a book, a game, a movie, food. I don't care. Anything.
Somebody else go first.
Recommend something and sell it to the crowd. Next, you're up. Don't
So
choke.
it can be a game. So totally not world building, but it's the most addicted I've ever been to a video game. Rainbow Six Siege. If you've tried multiplayer shooters and you hated them, like myself, and you wanted something deeper, Rainbow Six Siege is considerably deeper. It is not all Twitch reaction, run around Halo, jump around, which some people really like that, but it seemed like immensely brainless the times I tried to play Halo multiplayer. And Siege is incredibly dynamic, incredibly tactical, has a very high skill ceiling, and a very climbable path up to the top as far as learning the maps, learning the different techniques you can use. There's like 12-ish attacking operators and 12-ish defending operators. You have a team of 5 on each side. Each operator has their own unique gadget, special thing they do, and has different weapons, the different ways they fit, organized as a team. You go start calculating the mathematical combinations of everything, and you get amazingly high numbers, even completely ignoring personal preferences of tactics and skills of the individuals. I put in hundreds of hours in that compared to the next competitive anything multiplayer, which is probably in the dozens. So it's a really good game if you're kind of like burnt out in the past of competitive video games. I think it's a really cool thing to try out. I don't know how in depth I'm going, so.
That's good enough.
Cool.
Monica?
Sure. I recently read a book that was translated into English from Chinese a couple of years ago, I guess, called The Three-Body Problem. And I will look up the author of this later because it's a Chinese name and I always butcher the pronunciation of those, but there will be text appearing on screen, during this or something. But I had heard positive things about the book, and what got me to actually read it was the Tor free ebook of the month. If you don't know about this, you can sign up to get they will choose one book a month, and it's available for like the first week of the month only. And it happened to be the free ebook in a recent month, so I read it, and it's a neat story with an alien world that I found really engaging. I don't want to spoil things, but the title of the book is The Three-Body Problem, and it's a world in a distant star system. The characters, the sort of point of view characters, are in China during the Cultural Revolution is where the story starts. And as somebody who grew up in the American school system, I was kind of at the Wikipedia level knowledge of some of the stuff that was going on, but the book actually has footnotes. There are translators' footnotes for both some of the history and some of the science, because the alien world that we see through the actions of these characters, and the story actually takes place over a period of 30 or 40 years. But we see interactions with this other world. It is very alien the way their civilization works, and it feels real. And the science behind it is there are a couple of things that I look at it and say, well, okay, that has to be a plot device, but it's an engaging world, and I've just downloaded the sequel, so it ends up, I think it's the first book of a trilogy, but The Three-Body Problem, really engaging world and engaging story.
So
and since it's a translation of a Chinese one, it preserves the storytelling technique. So I didn't feel like I was reading a Western novel, but yet I engaged with it, even though I don't have the cultural background for the original context.
So when you said the title of the book, my first thought was The Three-Body Problem until the fourth moon goddess comes along.
There is that, yeah.
So if Green wants to go last, I will say my recommendation will be a book as well. On the topic of world building, actually, that I just thought of because it's sitting on my desk. The book is called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. So Joseph Campbell wrote this book. It's, I guess you'd call it a comparative mythology, or a basically it goes through myths from around the world, be they religions or folk tales or folklore or history, or well, history, right? But it's basically it brings everything down to what are the common themes and elements in all these stories. What makes a heroic story globally? And I'm pretty sure there's been some disagreement with his writings on the academic level, but that's not what I'm paying attention to as an author. What I want to know is what makes a heroic journey, right? What are the steps? What are the phases? How do you get from farmer that his family gets killed to the guy that destroys a lich somewhere down the line or something like that. So for that kind of stuff, it's a great read, and it gives you a bunch of different cultural perspectives that allow you to incorporate that kind of thought process into your writing, so that it's not. I mean, because every story's been written several times. Your job is to make it appear unique and original and fresh to the reader. So this is it's useful in that regard. So that would be my recommendation. All right, Green.
Okay, so I have two. I'm gonna cheat.
You always cheat. Go ahead.
So the first one is a role-playing game called Microscope. I think it's won Game of the Year for some role-playing. I don't know. Really interesting game. Basically, what you do is you build worlds with it. You state a premise like galactic civilization falls or something. You state your start, you state the end, and then you and your players collaborate on filling in the history, the periods, the events, and the scenes, as it's called in the story. And you get to build out the history and the mechanics, and everything that there is about this world. So it's basically collaborative world building that you would see on the website, only you can do that like in a card game. So that's
Very nice.
the first thing. I haven't played the game yet. I've read through the manual. It's
Wait, you're recommending something you haven't even played yet?
yeah, because I can look at the mechanics and I can tell.
Because it sounds that
Next.
cool.
You
Anyway,
can report back next time after you've played
fine. So the second recommendation is a book called Whiz Biz, which is actually Monica pointed that one out to me last time, recently when we were talking about it. The thing that appeals to me most about Whiz Biz is its magic plus programming. And as a computer science nerd, I get inordinately excited about it. And it's really interesting to go read through. I mean, the book's, I don't know how old it is, but to see some fairly primitive programming and then take the attacks and the techniques that are shown in the book, like, but we could do so much more with this. And just really mess over everybody. I've found it to be a really interesting book to read. Well written, not overly lyrical, but as a computer science nerd, it's just so good. So anyway, those are my two.
Speaking of computer science nerd, we still do need to talk about your magical programming school, but we're not going to have time this episode, so
That's cool.
We'll make sure we get to it, because I have to know how a magical programming school works.
Yeah.
Yep. Next time on
Next
Factory
time.
Floor.
Next time.
There you go. Man, maybe you should take us out. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining with me this evening. I had a good time talking. So again,
Yep.
as long as we have fun talking, everything else is gravy.
Right.
With that said, thank you to all the viewers who are actually taking the time to watch and listen to us speak nerd for way longer than is probably necessary. But that's all right.
And if you have
if you-
comments, Put
You're
'em in
the real
comments.
heroes.
If you do have comments or suggestions, obviously let us know, and we'll take those into consideration.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody, and have a good evening.
See you later.